Welcome back to the Daily English Lab podcast. Before we go into the topic of today, imagine this. You are sitting in a lawyer's office, or maybe you are reading a contract before signing it, or perhaps you are watching a courtroom scene in an English movie, and everyone around you seems to understand exactly what is happening. But you are completely lost. The words sound like English, but they feel like a completely different language. If that has ever happened to you, you are not alone. And today, that changes. Because by the end of this episode, you are going to walk away with the exact vocabulary, phrases, and confidence you need to understand English in legal situations. Whether you are dealing with real legal matters, studying for a professional exam, or simply want to understand movies, news, and contracts better, this episode is going to be a game changer for you. So stay right here because we are just getting started. And trust me, this one is going to be worth every single minute. Welcome back once again to Daily English Lab Podcast, the place where English stops being confusing and starts being something you actually enjoy. I am so glad you are here today.
Because we are diving into one of the most requested and honestly one of the most important topics I have ever covered on this channel, English for legal contexts. Now, before you say, I am not a lawyer, why do I need this? Let me stop you right there. You do not need to be a lawyer to need legal English. Think about it. Have you ever had to sign a lease for an apartment? Have you ever read the terms and conditions of an app and had no idea what you were agreeing to? Have you ever watched a legal drama in English and had to turn on subtitles just to keep up? Legal English is everywhere. It shows up in contracts, in immigration documents, in workplace agreements, in news reports, in movies, and in everyday conversations when someone talks about their rights. And if your English breaks down the moment legal language appears, that is a gap that could actually cost you, not just in confidence, but sometimes in real-life situations. So today, we are going to fix that together. Here is exactly what we are going to cover. First, we are going to break down the most important legal vocabulary you need to know, explained in plain, simple English. Second, we're going to look at how English is structured differently from everyday English and why that matters. Third, we are going to explore common phrases used in legal conversations and courtroom settings. Fourth, we are going to practice reading and understanding a simple legal clause together. And fifth, we are going to go through the 3 most common mistakes English learners make with legal language and exactly how to avoid them. This episode is going to run about 20 minutes, so grab a notebook, maybe a cup of tea or coffee, and let us get into it. And before we go any further, drop a comment right now and tell me, what is your biggest challenge when it comes to legal English? Is it the vocabulary, the long, complicated sentences, or just the general fear that you might misunderstand something important? Tell me below. I read every single comment. And if you're new here, welcome to the family. Hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode because we drop new content every single week. Let's start with vocabulary because this is the foundation of everything. Legal English has its own vocabulary, words that either do not exist in everyday English or words that exist but mean something completely different in a legal context. This is actually one of the biggest reasons people feel lost when they encounter legal language. They think they know the word, but in a legal context, it means something entirely different. Let us look at some of the most important ones. The word plaintiff refers to the person who brings a case to court. In other words, the person making the complaint or the accusation. The defendant is the person being accused or sued. So in any court case, you have 2 main sides, the plaintiff and the defendant. Easy way to remember this. The plaintiff is the one who is plaintified. They have a complaint. A little silly, but it works. Now the word liable, this is a big one. To be liable means to be legally responsible for something. So if a company is found liable for an accident, it means the court has decided that company is legally responsible and must pay. Do not confuse this with the everyday word likely. They sound a little similar, but mean completely different things. Damages in legal English does not mean broken things. It means money awarded by a court to someone who has been harmed. So if someone wins a lawsuit, they might receive damages, meaning a sum of money as compensation. Jurisdiction refers to the official power or authority of a court to hear a particular case. Different courts have different jurisdictions. A local court may not have jurisdiction over an international business dispute, for example. And finally, breach. To breach a contract means to break the terms of it. So if you sign an agreement and then fail to do what you promised, you are in breach of contract. Picture a wall with a crack in it. A breach is that crack, that break. Let us look at these in real sentences. A company might say, "The defendant was found liable for damages caused by the defective product." A news report might say, "The case was dismissed because the court lacked jurisdiction." A landlord might write, "Failure to pay rent on time constitutes a breach of this agreement." And in a courtroom drama, you might hear, "The plaintiff is seeking $1 million in damages." Practice moment. Pause right now and try to use the word liable in your own sentence. Think about a situation, real or imagined, where someone could be held legally responsible for something. Say the sentence out loud. This is how vocabulary
actually sticks, not by reading it, but by using it. Here is your comment prompt for this section. Which of these words have you heard before but never fully understood? Tell me in the comments. Plaintiff, defendant, liable, damages, jurisdiction, or breach. Now here is something really interesting that a lot of English learners do not realize, and this is actually what makes legal English feel so alien. Legal English loves something called nominalization. This is when you take an action or a description and turn it into a noun, a thing. In everyday English, you might say, "We agreed." In legal English, it becomes, "An agreement was reached." In everyday English, you say, "They failed." Legal English says, "There was a failure of obligation." In everyday English, you say, "He paid." Legal documents say, "Payment was made." This is why legal language feels heavy and impersonal, because all the action is hidden inside nouns. Once you understand this pattern, you will start to decode legal writing so much faster. And here is a beautiful thing. If you ever need to write something that sounds more formal or professional in English, you can use this trick yourself. Let us also talk about passive voice because legal English is absolutely obsessed with it. You know how in everyday English we say, "The judge decided the case"? In legal language, it becomes, "The case was decided by the judge," or even just, "The case was decided," with no mention of who did it at all. This is intentional. Legal documents often use passive voice to sound objective and neutral, and sometimes to deliberately avoid assigning blame to a specific person. So when you are reading a contract and it says, "Payment shall be made," that is passive voice, and it means you are the one making the payment, even though it does not say you directly. This trips up so many learners. They read the contract and think, "Well, it does not say I have to do this," but actually it does. Let me tell you a quick story. A friend of mine, not a native English speaker, once signed an apartment lease without fully understanding the passive constructions in it. One clause said, "Carpets shall be professionally cleaned upon vacating the premises." She thought this meant the landlord would arrange it. It actually meant she was responsible for paying for professional carpet cleaning before she moved out. She only found out
when she was about to get her deposit back and did not. One sentence, one passive construction, a few $100s. That is why this matters, and that is why you are here today, so that never happens to you. Here is something that surprises almost everyone. Did you know that some legal English phrases are still based on Latin or Old French from hundreds of years ago, and lawyers still use them today in modern courts? Words like habeas corpus, which means the right of a person to be brought before a judge and not be held illegally, or pro bono, which means legal work done for free as a public service. You have probably heard this one in movies. Or affidavit, a written statement made under oath, meaning the person swears it is true and can face consequences if they lie. And then there is subpoena, an official legal document that orders someone to appear in court or provide evidence. You cannot ignore a subpoena. It is not optional. These terms come up constantly in legal news, in court dramas, and in real legal situations, so knowing them gives you a huge advantage. Think of them as the VIP vocabulary of legal English. When you hear them, you want to recognize them.
Immediately. Here's your memory trick. Group them by what they relate to. Habeas corpus is about freedom and rights. Pro bono is about free service. Affidavit is about sworn statements. Subpoena is about being officially called. 4 terms, 4 categories, easy to remember. Try this practice moment. Look up one recent legal news story in English, either local or international, and see how many of these terms appear. You will be surprised how quickly they show up once you start looking for them. But here is the trick that separates learners who plateau from learners who keep growing. It is not just knowing the words. It is knowing how to read a legal sentence without panicking.
And that is what we are going to do right now together. Here is a real example of a clause you might find in a standard employment contract. The employee shall not, during the term of this agreement or at any time thereafter, disclose to any third party any confidential information pertaining to the employer's business operations without the express written consent of the employer. Okay, deep breath. Let us break this down like detectives. The employee shall not. This means you, the worker, are not allowed to do something. During the term of this agreement or at any time thereafter, this means while you are working there and even after you leave. Disclose to any third party. Tell anyone outside the company. Any confidential information pertaining to the employer's business operations. Any private or sensitive information about how the company works. Without the express written consent of the employer, unless your employer officially gives you permission in writing. So in plain English, do not share company secrets with outsiders, not while you work there, not after you leave, unless the company officially says you can in writing. That is it. That is the whole sentence. And now you can read it without fear. Comment below. Does breaking it down like that help? Would you like me to do more of these sentence breakdowns in future episodes? Because I will absolutely do that if you want it. Now let us talk about some phrases that are commonly used in legal conversations and courtroom settings, because these come up in news, in movies, in interviews, and in real professional settings, and they are worth knowing cold. I plead the Fifth. In the United States, the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution gives people the right to not answer questions that might incriminate themselves, meaning answers that could be used against them in court. So when someone says, "I plead the Fifth," they are legally choosing to stay silent. You will hear this phrase even in casual conversation when someone jokingly does not want to answer a question. Innocent until proven guilty. This is one of the most fundamental principles of legal systems in many countries. It means that a person accused of a crime is considered innocent unless a court proves otherwise. This phrase is important in English because it reflects a core cultural and legal value. The burden of proof. This means the responsibility of proving something in court lies with the person making the claim. Usually in criminal cases, it is the prosecution, meaning the government or accusing side, that carries the burden of proof. They must prove guilt. The defendant does not have to prove innocence. Contempt of court. This means disrespecting or defying the authority of a court. If someone in a courtroom behaves badly, ignores a judge's order, or refuses to cooperate, they can be held in contempt of court and punished. And due process. This refers to the legal requirement that the government must respect all of a person's legal rights when taking any legal action against them. It is a protection that ensures fairness. Here is a mini-story to bring these to life. Imagine a television journalist who was covering a high-profile case. She interviews someone who was present at the scene of the incident. The moment she asks about a key detail, the man raises his hand and says calmly, "I am going to plead the Fifth on that one." She cannot push him. The phrase itself is a legal shield. Later, in court, the defense attorney argues that the prosecution has not met its burden of proof, that there is simply not enough evidence to remove the presumption of innocence. The judge agrees and reminds everyone in the room that any outburst will be considered contempt of court. In about 60 seconds of imagined courtroom drama, you just encountered 5 major legal English phrases in context. That is how you learn vocabulary that actually sticks. Now let us do something a little different and go deep on the 3 most common mistakes English learners make when it comes to English. Because knowing what not to do is just as powerful as knowing what to do. The first mistake is confusing law and legal. These words are related but not interchangeable. Law is a noun. It refers to the system of rules itself. Legal is an adjective. It means something is permitted by law or related to law. So you would say, "I studied law," not "I studied legal." And you would say, "Is this action legal?" not "Is this action law?" A lot of learners say things like, "I need legal advice about the law," which is actually fine, but they sometimes mix these up in ways that sound unnatural. Remember, law is the system, legal is the description. The second mistake is using guilty and responsible as if they mean exactly the same thing. In legal English, they are very different. Guilty is a verdict. It is an official decision made by a court in a criminal case. You cannot call someone guilty until the court says so. Responsible is broader. It can be used in civil cases, in everyday situations, and does not carry the same formal criminal weight. So saying the driver was responsible for the accident is appropriate in conversation.
but saying the driver was guilty
implies a criminal verdict has been reached. This distinction matters enormously in journalism, in professional communication, and in legal discussions. The third mistake is assuming that formal vocabulary always sounds better. A lot of learners think that to sound professional in legal English, they need to use as many complex words as possible. But good legal English, especially in modern professional settings, is actually moving toward clarity. Plain language is increasingly valued. Courts and governments around the world are rewriting legal documents in simpler English so ordinary people can understand them. So the goal is not to sound complicated. The goal is to be precise. Precision is the heart of legal English. Every word matters. Every word is chosen carefully. So do not try to sound fancy. Try to be exact. That is the real skill. Let us bring it all together now. Here are your key takeaways from today. First, legal vocabulary has specific meanings that are different from everyday English, and learning words like plaintiff, defendant, liable, damages, and breach gives you immediate power to understand legal contexts. Second, legal English relies heavily on nominalization and passive voice, which makes it feel distant and heavy. But once you understand these patterns, you can decode legal writing much more easily. Third, Latin and Old French legal terms like habeas corpus, pro bono, affidavit, and subpoena still appear in modern legal English, and knowing them helps you follow legal news and media. Fourth, you can read any legal sentence without fear by breaking it into pieces and translating the formal language into plain, everyday English step by step. And fifth, avoiding the most common mistakes, like confusing guilty with responsible or law with legal, immediately makes your English more accurate and professional. You have just done something most English learners never do. You have stepped into one of the most challenging areas of the English language and walked through it with curiosity instead of fear. That is genuinely impressive. Every time you show up to learn something new and uncomfortable, you are growing in a way that goes far beyond language. You are building confidence. And confidence in English, especially in high-stakes situations, that is life-changing. So here is what I want you to do right now. Leave a
Comment below and share one thing you learned today that surprised you or that you are going to use. Then go find one legal document, an app terms of service, a rental agreement, anything, and try to identify at least 3 of the words or patterns we talked about today. And if this episode helped you, please hit the like button. It genuinely helps this channel grow and reach more learners just like you. Subscribe if you have not already, because next week we are going deep on English for medical contexts, another area where the wrong vocabulary can have very real consequences, and where the right phrases can make you sound confident, informed, and professional in any healthcare situation. You do not want to miss that one. This has been Daily English Lab Podcast. I will see you in the next one. Keep showing up, keep learning, and remember, every great English speaker started exactly where you are right now.